My 19-year-old son called me from a gas station bathroom, whispering like the walls had opinions, and said, "Dad, I have a video, and I wish I didn't." And for a second I just stood there holding a half-packed duffel bag, staring at a pair of hiking boots like they were suddenly evidence. Because 2 minutes earlier, my biggest problem was whether we needed more marshmallows or more bug spray. And now my entire marriage was tilting off the counter. Slowly, like a glass someone nudged and pretended they didn't. I remember the exact sound of the kitchen, the fridge humming, the sink dripping, the little click of my wife's nails on her phone screen as she texted someone and smiled at nothing. A private smile. The kind you don't share with a man you've built a life with. The kind you lock behind new passwords. And yeah, she'd changed all of them lately. Email, banking, even the stupid streaming service. As if I was going to steal our own account and go live under a bridge with Netflix. When I asked, she said she wanted space. Said she was just hanging with friends. Said, "You're being dramatic." And I laughed because 20 years teaches you which battles are worth it. Except I didn't realize she'd already picked the war. She just hadn't told me the date. We were the couple people pointed at. High school sweethearts who actually made it. 2 kids, a 19-year-old who acted too grown, and a 12-year-old who still left socks in the hallway like breadcrumbs. We did everything together. Grocery runs, parent meetings, late-night porch talks, even folding laundry. And I used to joke that our marriage was so stable it was basically an appliance, reliable, slightly noisy, impossible to replace. So when she suggested we take a vacation in the forest, a real unplugged cabin trip, I was all in. I pictured firelight, card games, my wife stealing my hoodie, our youngest complaining about no Wi-Fi, our oldest pretending he wasn't enjoying it, and then she hit me with, "I want to invite Ethan." Like it was normal to add a random ingredient to a recipe you've cooked the same way for 2 decades. Ethan, her friend, the guy who showed up to barbecues with sad eyes and expensive cologne, the guy who laughed too hard at her jokes and barely looked at me. She said he'd separated from his wife, that he needed support, that it would be good for him to get fresh air, and I hesitated. Because I'm not a saint and I'm not stupid. But I also didn't want to be the guy who says no and gets painted as cold, so I agreed. I even told myself I was doing something generous. Look at me, Mr. Mature, opening the cabin door to a man who might cry into my trail mix. The first weird moment happened a week later at a family dinner. My wife disappeared to the garage to take a call, and when she came back, she smelled like she'd stepped outside into a different life. Cheeks flushed, eyes bright. Not the tired mom glow, something sharper. Our oldest watched her like he was doing math in his head. He's always been observant, the kind of kid who notices when a picture frame gets moved 2 inches. Later, he asked me, "Dad, are you and Mom good?" And I said, "Of course, because what else do you say when your whole identity is built on being steady?" And I meant it. I still meant it. That's the part people don't understand. Betrayal doesn't arrive wearing a villain cape. It comes in through the front door holding a casserole. In the days after, the passwords changed. The phone flipped face down. The little disappearances, quick errands that took too long, a gym session that never made her sweaty. She said she needed space. Said she felt like she'd lost herself. And I tried to be supportive because I'm not her jailer. I'm her husband. I even started making her coffee the way she likes. Extra foam, cinnamon. Because I thought, okay, midlife wobble, we can handle this. Then, 2 days before the cabin trip, she told me she was going away for a couple days with friends. Just a quick reset. She kissed my cheek like a stamp, already mailed, and my son's eyes narrowed, not angry, focused, like he was watching a magician's hands. That night, he didn't go out with his buddies like usual. He just hovered, asked weird little questions like where Mom said she was staying, what time she'd leave. I teased him, said, "What are you?" "Her security detail." And he didn't laugh. He just said, "I have a bad feeling." And I should have listened harder, because the next afternoon, while I was in the kitchen packing flashlight batteries, my phone buzzed with his name, and when I answered, I heard breathing. Then his voice, tight and shaking. "Dad." I followed her. "I'm sorry, I had to." And there's a car, and there's a hotel, and there's Ethan, and there's Mom. And he swallowed like he was trying to swallow a fire. And he said, I filmed it. I didn't want to, but I needed you to believe me. And my hands went cold around the batteries, like I'd been holding ice instead of AA Duracells. And right then, I understood why the cabin checklist felt like evidence, why the boots looked guilty, why my wife's private smile had been a lock turning, and my son whispered, please don't make me say it out loud. And I didn't, because I already knew exactly what the video would show. And I realized the worst part wasn't the cheating. Not yet. It was that my kid had to witness the moment our family story cracked, and he was calling me from a bathroom to tell me where the pieces fell. I told him, son, you did not do anything wrong. You hear me? You did the hardest thing in the cleanest way you could. Then I swallowed the part where my throat wanted to close. Because fathers don't get to fall apart on schedule. Not when their kid is calling with his voice in pieces. I asked where he was, he said, still at the gas station by the hotel, and the word hotel landed like a joke with no punchline. Our forest trip had a cabin, a fireplace, mosquitoes. Not a keycard and a lobby scent of lemon cleaner. I said, stay put, don't go back inside, don't confront anyone. And he tried to argue, said, I already saw everything, what's left? And I said, what's left is you staying safe and staying my son, not becoming a witness in your own trauma. I heard him sniff, the kind of quiet crying that makes you feel older than you are. Then I said, send me the video. And he hesitated, because he didn't want to hand me the grenade, but he sent it anyway, a little file arriving like a funeral invitation. I didn't open it. I couldn't. Not yet. Because the kitchen around me was still normal. A grocery receipt on the counter. Our youngest science project volcano drying by the window. My wife's travel mug sitting there like she might walk back in and complain about the lid. And I needed one clean breath before I let the poison in. I walked into the garage, the place where I kept things I could fix, a toolbox, a bike pump, spare nails, like the universe loved irony, and I sat on the cold step and stared at my phone. My hands actually shaking, not from fear, from disbelief, because this wasn't the story I knew. In my story, my wife and I were the couple who survived everything. The early broke years, the miscarriage we never talk about at parties, the job losses, the fights about money and whose turn it was to drive to soccer. We didn't have a perfect marriage. We had a real one. And I thought real meant unbreakable. I finally opened the video, and my brain tried to protect me by turning it into something distant, like it was a clip from someone else's life. But it was her voice, her laugh, that exact laugh that used to live in our living room, and Ethan's hand brushing her arm like he belonged there. No graphic details, just enough to confirm what my son couldn't say out loud. The way she leaned toward him. The way she looked around like she was checking if the coast was clear. The way she wasn't thinking about the fact that somewhere 2 kids were waiting for her to be their mom. I ended it fast, because I didn't need a full documentary. I needed the headline, and it screamed, I sat there for maybe 10 seconds, maybe 10 years. Then I stood up, and my body went into this calm mode that scared me, like a switch flipped from husband to survivor. I walked back into the kitchen, opened a drawer, took out a notepad, the one with my wife's handwriting on the first page, grocery lists and reminders like dentist, Tuesday, and I tore to a clean page. I wrote, I know everything. Don't contact me. Don't follow me. Then I crossed out, don't follow me. Because I realized she absolutely would, I wrote instead, the kids are not your messengers. Then I paused, because I wasn't trying to be dramatic. I was trying to be precise. I added, I will contact you when I'm ready. I left the note on the counter under her travel mug, like a final polite gesture. I grabbed my duffel bag, but I didn't pack more. I didn't stomp around. I didn't smash anything. I just moved through the house quietly, collecting the essentials like I was evacuating a building with a fire alarm only I could hear. Documents, my laptop, a few clothes, my old photo of the 4 of us at the lake. Then I put it back, because I wasn't ready to look at Happy Us like it was a lie. And while I did this, my youngest wandered in, barefoot, holding a controller, asked, "Dad, are we still going to the forest?" And that question hit harder than the video, because it reminded me this wasn't just my marriage. It was their childhood. I knelt down and said, "Not today, buddy. Plans changed." And he frowned, and I forced a small smile, the kind you wear like armor. I told him to go finish his homework, and he complained, and for a split second, I wanted to hug him so tight he couldn't ever get hurt by adult decisions. But I didn't, because I needed to stay steady. I texted my oldest, "I'm coming to you. Stay where you are." Then I called my brother. Not for comfort. For logistics, because when your world collapses, you learn who to call for a ladder, he answered. I told him, "I need a place tonight." And he said, "Say less." I locked the front door behind me, sat in my car, and for a moment I just stared at our house. The curtains, the porch light, the little wreath my wife insisted on keeping up too long after the holidays. And I realized I wasn't leaving a building. I was leaving a version of myself. Then my phone lit up with her name. 1 call, 2 calls, 3. Like she could dial reality back into place. And I didn't answer. Because if I heard her voice, I might crack, and I didn't have the luxury of cracking yet. I drove to the hotel area, picked up my son outside the gas station. He got in, and he looked older than yesterday. He didn't ask questions. He just stared out the window with red eyes, and I said, "I'm proud of you." And he finally whispered, "I hate her right now." And I said, "You're allowed." Then I turned the car toward my brother's place, while her calls kept coming like raindrops, steady, relentless, pretending they could wash away what she'd done. And that's when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, and it said, "Please don't do anything stupid. We can explain." And my stomach dropped, because it wasn't her number. It was Ethan's, which meant he had my contact, which meant this wasn't as impulsive as she painted it, and my calm turned into something colder, something clearer. Because explanations are for accidents, and this was a pattern wearing perfume. At my brother's place, I finally let my son breathe. He sat on the couch like his bones were too heavy, and my brother, bless him, didn't ask for details. He just handed my kid a soda and me a glass of water like hydration could solve betrayal. I checked my phone, 20 missed calls from my wife, 5 texts that went from, "Where are you?" to "Please answer," to "Don't do this," to "I'm sorry," to a final one that made my jaw clench. Ethan is here and he's freaking out, as if his feelings were now part of my responsibilities. I texted back one line, "Do not contact my son." Then I turned my phone off, because I wasn't going to let her turn my night into a hostage negotiation. In the quiet, my brother finally said, "Tell me the headline." And I did. Simple, clean, my wife and Ethan, my oldest saw it, filmed it, called me. My brother's face hardened. He muttered, "I always hated that guy," which should have made me laugh. But instead it made me realize how many people probably noticed things I refused to. Later, my oldest showed me the rest of what he recorded. Not just the proof, but the lead-up. Her stepping out of her car, checking her hair in the mirror, texting, smiling, like she was getting ready for a date. Not sneaking around the father of her kids. And my son kept apologizing. I told him again, "Stop. You didn't break anything. You exposed what was already broken." He nodded, but his eyes stayed wet. Then my youngest called me because my wife must have told him I'd gone out, and he asked, "Dad, where are you?" And I could hear my wife's voice in the background coaching him, so I said, "I'm with Uncle. I'll see you soon. I love you." And I hung up before I said something sharp, because my child didn't deserve to hear his parents' mess. An hour later, my brother's doorbell rang, and my stomach knew before my ears did. My wife's voice cut through the hallway, pleading, fast, like she could outrun consequences. My brother looked at me like, "Your call," and I stood up, smoothed my shirt, because dignity is a habit, and I opened the door to the woman who'd been my partner for 2 decades. Her mascara slightly smudged, hair messy, eyes huge. She reached for me like muscle memory, and I stepped back, and the hurt on her face flashed into anger for half a second. Before she swapped back to tears, she whispered my name, said, "Please don't do this. It didn't mean anything. I made a mistake." And I said, "No. You made a series of choices." Then she glanced past me into the living room and said, "Where's our son?" And the way she said our son, like he was a shared possession, made something inside me go steel, I told her. "He's not a prop in your apology tour." And she flinched, because she wasn't used to me sounding like a closed door. She tried to step inside anyway, and my brother blocked her with one hand, polite but firm, and my wife turned back to me whispering, "Ethan is nothing. He's nobody." I felt lonely, and I almost laughed. Because lonely is what you say when the house is quiet. Not when your husband is 5 feet away, packing batteries for a family trip you were never planning to take with him. She kept talking, fast, messy, like if she stacked enough words she could build a bridge back to me. She swore it started after she invited Ethan to the forest trip, said she only wanted to help, then it got confusing. And I said, "Confusing is mixing up cabin reservations, not climbing into a hotel like you're single." She winced, grabbed my wrist, and I gently pulled away, because even her touch felt like a lie now. Then she did the thing I didn't expect. She tried to blame me without fully saying it. "You've been so focused on work. You're always tired. We stopped talking like we used to." And I nodded slowly and said, "So you stopped talking to me and started talking to him. That tracks." She burst into tears, said she'd end it, said she'd delete him, said she'd do therapy, said anything. And I said, "You already deleted me. You just didn't hit send." Behind her, a car door slammed in the street, and through the window I saw Ethan stepping out like a man walking into someone else's movie, holding his phone up like he was ready to record his own innocence. My wife spun and hissed at him, "Go away," and he didn't. He walked toward the door anyway, and my brother muttered, "Oh, hell no." Ethan called my name like we were buddies, said, "Look, man, it's not what you think." And I laughed once, short, bitter, and said, "If you say that sentence again, I'll start charging rent for the air you're wasting." He raised his hands, tried the calm voice, said, "We were both vulnerable, it happened. We didn't want to hurt you." And I stared at him and said, "Then why do you have my number? Why are you texting me? Why are you here? Because people who don't want to hurt you don't show up at your brother's door like they're negotiating a refund." My wife grabbed his arm, begging him to leave, and he shook her off, annoyed, like she was now inconvenient. And that moment, that tiny flash of his real face, told me everything. He didn't love her. He loved winning, and she loved the feeling of being chosen. And I said quietly, to both of them, "Get off this property, or I'm calling the police." And for the first time, the power shifted. My wife froze, Ethan's jaw tightened, and my brother stepped forward and opened the door wider, like, "Try me." Ethan backed up, muttering insults under his breath. My wife looked at me one last time, eyes wide, and whispered, "Please," and I said, "Go home, be a mother. Stop chasing me like I'm your safety net." Then I closed the door, and my son, from the couch, whispered, "Dad, are we okay?" And I sat beside him and said, "We will be, even if she never is." The next morning my wife went nuclear in the way only someone caught can. She didn't threaten me with drama. She threatened me with image. She sent a group text to our families. "I made a mistake, but he abandoned us. Please pray for our marriage." And I stared at it like, wow. So now I'm a villain in the story you wrote while cheating. My brother snorted and said, "She's speed-running manipulation." And my phone started buzzing with calls from her mom, her sister, even my aunt, people who love me but hate conflict. I didn't answer. I wrote one calm message and sent it to the group. "Our son witnessed her affair. There is video proof. I left to protect the kids from a scene. I will not discuss details." Then I muted the chat. Because I refused to debate my own reality. My oldest was furious, said, "She's using us." And I told him, "She's trying to use you, Don't let her. Meanwhile, my youngest kept texting, "When are you coming home? Mom is crying," and that part hurt, because she was turning his heart into a sponge. I called him, kept my voice warm, said, "I'm not mad at you, I'm not leaving you, I'm handling grown-up stuff." He asked if Mom was in trouble, and I said, "Mom made choices, and we're going to make new plans." After that call, I drove to the house with my brother, not to reconcile, to retrieve. I needed clothes, my passport, and the kids' school papers. My wife met me in the driveway like she'd been waiting all night, eyes puffy, holding my favorite hoodie like a hostage. She said, "Can we just talk inside?" And I said, "No, because inside is where you lied to my face." She tried to step closer, and I held up my hand. "Stop sign energy," she whispered. Ethan meant nothing, and I said, "Then why was he comfortable enough to show up at my brother's door?" She went pale, and I realized she hadn't expected me to see him there, meaning she'd been telling different versions to different people, which is basically her new hobby. Then she said the twist I really didn't see coming. "I'm pregnant." And the world went dead silent in my ears, like someone hit mute on life. I stared at her, trying to read if this was truth or a desperation grenade, and my brother sucked in a breath beside me. My wife's hands shook around the hoodie. She whispered, "I haven't told anyone. I just found out." And I looked at her and said, "Whose is it?" She flinched like I'd slapped her with reality. Then she did this frantic head shake, like she could shake the question away. She said, "It's yours. Of course it's yours. Why would you even ask that?" And I said, "Because you were in a hotel with him while I was packing batteries for our family trip. That's why." My voice stayed calm, almost polite, which scared her more than yelling ever could. She started crying harder, saying dates didn't matter, saying I was the only man she loved, saying Ethan was a mistake, and I cut through it. Dates matter because truth matters. And right now, you don't get to demand trust, as if it's a subscription you can reactivate. My brother asked, "Have you even been to a doctor?" She hesitated, then admitted she'd only taken a test, and I nodded, because that told me everything about her strategy. This wasn't a baby announcement. It was a panic button, I said. "You need a real appointment, and until then, don't throw that word around our kids like it's a shield." She tried to grab my arm again and begged, "We can fix this. We can start over." And I looked past her at our front window where my youngest's silhouette moved, small and anxious, watching his parents like we were a storm. And I said, "Starting over requires honesty. You can't build a new house on the same sinkhole." She whispered, "What do you want?" And I said, "I want the kids protected. I want space. And I want you to stop contacting my oldest like he's your therapist." Her face twisted, and she snapped, "He ruined everything by following me." And my whole body went cold. Because there it was, the real her. The part that blames the smoke alarm for the fire. I stepped forward, and my voice dropped. "Don't you ever put this on him again? He did what you should have done. He told the truth." She tried to backpedal, sobbing, but it was too late. My oldest had been standing in the doorway, and he said, "I heard you, Mom." And her face collapsed. Not from guilt, from being caught saying the quiet part out loud. I turned to my son and said, "Get your backpack. You're coming with me today." And my wife screamed, "You can't take my children." And I said, "Watch me take care of them." Something you forgot how to do when you started taking hotel selfies and calling it space. Then I walked inside, past her, past the life we built. And for the first time, the house didn't feel like home. It felt like a stage after the curtain drops, messy, exposed, and empty. I didn't kidnap anybody. I parented. I took my oldest for coffee first, because he needed something normal. Then I picked up my youngest with his backpack and his confused little frown, and I told him the truth in kid-sized pieces. Mom and Dad are going to live separately for a while. You didn't cause it. You are loved. He asked if we were still going to the forest, and I almost laughed at the timing. Then I said, "Not that cabin, but we'll still go somewhere. Just us." Because I refused to let her choices steal their joy too. That afternoon, I met with a lawyer. Not for revenge, for structure, for guardrails. Because my wife was already rewriting the narrative in group chats like she was producing a pity documentary. The lawyer said the words temporary custody and financial disclosure. And I felt weirdly relieved, like finally there was a map. Then my phone lit up again. My wife's name. And I didn't answer. I texted instead. Only email about the kids, she replied instantly with a photo of a pregnancy test and the caption, please. And I stared at it. Because a photo proves nothing except that she owns a camera. I forwarded it to my lawyer and wrote, she claims this. Then I blocked her number for the night. Because I needed one quiet evening where my heart wasn't a punching bag. Later, my oldest showed me something he'd found. Ethan's social media. A separated man posting anniversary throwbacks with his wife 2 weeks ago. Comments full of hearts. My son's hands shook as he scrolled, and I realized Ethan wasn't freshly broken. He was actively lying. Which meant my wife wasn't just unfaithful. She'd been recruited into someone else's con. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt grief because she'd thrown 20 years away for a man who couldn't even commit to a lie consistently. When she finally emailed me at midnight, it wasn't romance. It was panic. Ethan won't answer. His wife is calling me. What do I do? And I stared at the screen and thought, wow, you really thought I'd be your emergency contact for your affair. I wrote back one sentence, tell the truth. Then I closed the laptop, turned off the lights, and tucked my youngest into bed at my brother's house. He whispered, are you mad at Mom? And I said, I'm disappointed in her choices, but I'm not going to let anger drive our car. He nodded like he didn't fully get it, but wanted to, and I sat in the dark a while after he fell asleep, listening to the quiet, realizing forgiveness isn't a light switch. It's a long road, and I wasn't even sure I wanted to start walking it. Because dignity has a cost, but so does staying. And for the first time in 20 years, I chose myself and my kids over the idea of us.